I will pat myself on the back. I said last pod that the Boston Celtics are going to have to win a fourth quarter to win this series. And the only fourth quarter they won all series was a garbage time one in the game 4 blowout win. But game 6, which was close, Miami almost got it. Boston saved by the grace of Derek White. And game 7, I have plenty to say on it, but like the bottom line is the Celtics had a chance at the start of the fourth quarter to still win this game, win this series, get another chance at the finals and make history. And they blew it in less than 2 minutes, I'd say, and could not get back into it. And that was kind of a microcosm of how the whole game went.
Yeah, it was a all-time moment that will fall into the annals of history that never get talked about. The Derek White buzzer-beating, game-winning layup was the second shot in NBA history that was a buzzer beater when the team was facing elimination in the playoffs. And the only other person to do it was Michael Jordan's The Shot. So a spectacular moment that he followed up with a fantastic performance. Derek White played really well, starting from game 4 onwards, really hung in there against Jimmy Butler on the defensive end after they were hunting him in the first 3 games and made a ton of his open shots. But in game 7, the pressure dials up, and the Heat, who win in all of the margins, were able to just build a lead on the Boston Celtics, not winning in the margins and missing open shots. And that, I mean, it's a make or miss league. It's a cliche thing to say, but you got to knock down the open shots. Those are less likely to go in a game of this magnitude. And so the Heat were able to win in different ways. And you mentioned it here, Caleb Martin was spectacular and seemingly came out of nowhere in this playoff run, right? A bench player for most of the season. He's never really found a home and has just indoctrinated himself into this Miami Heat culture and has turned himself into potentially the best player in this series, which is
Yeah.
astonishing and shocking to say that when there's Jimmy Butler, Jayson Tatum, and Jaylen Brown, who's in line for a big payday after being all second NBA team and not having the series that him or the organization would have wanted going into these contract talks coming up in the offseason. But yeah, Caleb Martin, he did get a couple votes for Eastern Conference Finals MVP, deservedly so. And yeah, I'm just fascinated to see if this opens up his career as a improved player, like a Jeremy Grant type, who wanted to get a bigger role on another team and stepped in and improved his production on a less successful team, or if he's going to stick in Miami and this is more of a flash in the pan. I guess we'll get a greater sense of it in the next round here in the NBA Finals against the Denver Nuggets.
Yeah, he certainly got my half of the Sports Next Door vote for Eastern Conference MVP finals. Yeah, like you said earlier, the Heat hit a lot more open shots, and I don't think Caleb Martin missed an open shot this game, which is impressive enough if you're just a spot up shooter, a guy who sits in his spot and catches and shoots the open 3. But he was creating his own shot all night, and he was fantastic at attacking the open space, using fakes, taking advantage of a Celtics defense that was often bumbling in transition. And every time he set himself up for that open look, it just went down. Like, that was a superstar level performance by him on just ridiculous efficiency. And yeah, it was partly the Celtics missing open look threes. Like, I think they did hit them at below the amount you'd expect. But that was also shot selection. Like, I think Shaq said on the after game panel, if we miss 10 straight threes in the first quarter, I'm saying to my teammates, like, next guy who takes a 3, I'm going to punch you in the face. And like the Celtics, someone needed a bit of that mentality, like especially there in the third and fourth when it was like keep shooting the open threes, but a lot of the threes they took were not open. And the one or two, I think like Derek White hit one like nice contested three as opposed to whatever open better looks he got. And like that just encouraged it all the more. Um, I like that and the inability to get stops, to get back in transition, off of turnovers and such, I thought were the main downfalls of the Celtics. Second would be Tatum and Brown's play. Tatum with the injury on the first play of the game, it was pretty clearly affecting him throughout the game. He was good for a spot up three. He was one level better than a pylon on defense. And he could, with great difficulty, get a bucket in transition. And I think he had one roll or like cut to the net off a screen, and a couple assists. Like it felt like that just put a ceiling on the Celtics offense. Like there was a certain urgency and hustle they needed to match what the Heat were doing, and Tatum was in a state where he couldn't bring it, and it's a 5-man game, so if one guy's reduced, the whole team's reduced. And like of all the talk about Mazzulla's post-game comments, that's kind of the one I'd maybe quibble with the most. Like I think it was at the start of the fourth quarter, he said like he just needs to play through it, and Tatum said something very similar in his post-game press conference, like saying it was a factor, but I just needed to get through it and be better, and I couldn't. And like I think someone needs on the bench in decision-making capacity needed to be able to take a sober second look and like really question that and not leave it up to the player in that particular situation based on what I saw in the game. And then on the Jaylen Brown half, he drove a lot of their offense and like was the most or like tied with Derek White, as I'd say, as like most consistently creating shots. I thought he was fine on defense, but he will be talked about a lot. I alluded to that start of the fourth quarter, and like 80% of it goes on Jaylen Brown's shoulders. Like 2 turnovers, an offensive foul, and like a really boneheaded 3 in transition when it was still tight after the Heat had missed a bad 3 and the Celtics were running it in transition. That like 4 or 5 minute stretch, I think 80% of that you can lay on his shoulders. So yeah, I think like the idea that you throw out the logic of we were going to sign this player to a max contract, super max contract, and then they had 5 terrible minutes of basketball, and now we're rethinking that decision is stretched and going to be wrong more often than not. But it's certainly a discussion that's going to be had around the media and probably in Celtics front office.
Yeah, especially with the contract that he's in line for and the new CBA restrictions that are going to make cap management and salaries less flexible. And it's just tough to explain or reason with your management on why you have 2 contracts that make up 2/3 of your salary in this day and age with how punitive these new restrictions can be. And so, yeah, there will be important conversations had now with the Celtics moving forward about what they're going to potentially do next. Miami capitalized very well on the Tatum injury. They switched a ton of screens, the most they did in the series, because they knew once Tatum was down a leg, that there was no one on this Boston team that could get past their perimeter defense on every occasion. And so they just kept them in front, forced up tougher, longer possessions, still gave up some open shots, but those weren't falling because Boston was struggling to get easier looks at the rim.
It was devious. Like the Heat would just constantly force the Celtics to make one more pass, just knowing that like as long as the ball didn't end up in the paint and ended up on the 3-point line, like you're playing mind games with them at that point, and they missed a lot more of them than they made.
Yeah, and it's all credit to the Heat and Eric Spoelstra, what he's been able to do now consistently for a number of years. And I'm really, really excited to see Spoelstra versus Michael Malone here in the NBA Finals.